Hello folks, welcome to a new episode of the Modern Folk Embroidery Flosstube. It is a glorious day today. I've got the light shining through in my studio space. Outside there is a blackbird singing a really beautiful song. It's always nice to hear them in the evening. But as you will notice, there is no video today, but just still images. As I don't have a spot to film today, but still some exciting news to share with you, I thought I'd just record the audio and insert some still images and a couple of video bits that I can shoot separately. Today I am launching no less than 5 new designs, one of which is a reproduction sampler that I've been really excited about sharing with you for quite some time. So let's dive right in with all the nice things. Last year I received a very exciting email from a seller of antique samplers in the Netherlands. Now it's always a joy to receive emails with special samplers. I mean, the eye candy alone is always inspiring and just brings so much joy, as many as you will recognize. Now this email had an image right at the top that made my heart skip a beat. There it was, a truly stunning sampler from 1833 from the Vierlande area, and I got the chance to actually buy that one and add it to my collection. So I didn't hesitate a second when I saw that one, and I immediately replied to the email and showed my interest in the sampler. And the rest is history. AKGIT 1833 found her way into my sampler collection. But first I want to tell you just a little bit about the Vierlande area. So it's a rural area in northern Germany, and it brought forth a very unique style of sampler making. Sometime in the late 18th to early 19th century, girls started making samplers stitched mainly in black wool or silk threads. And the samplers themselves are very instantly recognizable through the motifs that they were using. Just like you can easily recognize a sampler from Groningen, which is also completely black and not that far away, by the way. You can also recognize samplers that were made by the Quakers through their beautiful medallions. So there's certain styles that you instantly recognize as this is a sampler from this region. Vierlande is one such a region. When we look at the motifs, a lot what we see are beautiful, very ornamental, large trees of life that are scattered around the sampler. There are large medallions, really beautiful. Unlike the medallions on Quaker samplers, they are not octagonal, but quite round in shape. There are some really lovely diamonds, usually with a little crown at the top. And then if there's any empty space left, the stitcher would sort of fill all of that up with even more medallions of various sizes, sometimes very, very small. And scattered throughout these samplers are beautiful alphabets, sometimes very neatly arranged in a row, sometimes really thrown higgledy-piggledy, again, where there was some empty space left and where some letters could fit on the sampler. Now, the trees themselves are really worth mentioning as well, because they are so stunning when you see them, and there's so much to discover in them. There's little birds sometimes hidden in them, sometimes there's deer very obviously sort of on either side of a pot. But they're really, really beautiful, and you can really see the link that they have to traditional forms of folk art, such as folk painting. You can really see that it's borrowing its imagery from other art forms as well. The trees themselves have actually inspired me to work on my alternative trees for this year's Stitch Along. When you look at the artwork of the alternative trees, there's 4 trees of life that I designed specifically for this project, and the top left one on the artwork booklet was very strongly inspired by Vierlande samplers. Despite that there is so much to see on these samplers and the sheer amount of different ornaments that are worked on Vierlande samplers, I always think that they emanate this beautiful calm and peacefulness, which is the result of the samplers being fully monochromatic. So when you work with just one color on a ground, no matter how much you stuff onto it, the image becomes very peaceful and calm, and it's actually really quite meditative to stitch these types of samplers. These samplers can be very, very big, and they can have a lot of stitches, but just because you work with just that one thread, you don't have to think about how many colors am I going to use, is this the right symbol that I'm using, am I making any errors in that? The only thing that you need to do is look at the pattern and just stitch what you see, and you don't have to think about any colors, which is kind of nice and calming and much more meditative than when you have to worry about following all of the symbols. Now, when you look at this sampler, we know a lot about the maker, from where she lived in the region and why she stitched this, because these samplers were being used as sources of patterns for their linens, for the bed linens, decorative cushions that they had. Sometimes even on traditional costume we see little flowers stitched, usually in full color on the clothing, because the clothing was quite colorful, as you can see in this image of two women from the Vierlande area. They also use little borders and things like that. So it's very useful to have these samplers. But we don't know who AKGIT actually was. Now, I've done a lot of research when I purchased this sampler, and that was one of the reasons why I didn't immediately want to chart this sampler and release it, because I wanted to try and at least find out who AKGIT might be. Unfortunately, I have found two girls that are possibilities, but it is without any certainty that it is actually these two girls. Now, Vierlande girls used to have a very odd way of a naming convention for samplers. They would use letters that were found within their name, not just the first name, first letter, last name, first letter, but they would just use syllables sometimes, or sometimes some random letters from their names that they would stick together in the initials, which makes it quite tricky for us to find out who this girl was. I think one of the reasons that they might have done this is that if they were in a small village and there was already, for instance, a girl with the initials AG, then this one girl might think like, well, if I add a few letters of my name, then it will differentiate it enough for me to sort of stand alone. So when I bring my clothing to the wash place, it will be made certain that this is mine and not someone else's. So I think that might be one of the reasons that they used more letters in their initials than they had. I found two girls, as I said. Both girls have roughly the same name, and their name was AKGIT. So we can really see the letters AKGIT in both of those names. I have not been able to find any other girls from this region from the period that they would have been born. And I sort of cast my net quite widely. I looked for girls from about 6 to about 18 years old who were sort of born in those years. And I couldn't find anyone who matched AKGIT in their initials. So as soon as a name started with A, then I would sort of look at all of the letters in their names and try and see if I could find AKGIT. Now, only the two girls with the names AKGIT were found, and they were both from 1823 and 1824. Now, this would have meant that they were 9 to 10 years old when they were working their samplers, and I mean, that is quite young, but it is not impossible. There's quite a few, like large ornamental samplers have been worked by girls from around 10 years old. Usually girls would be about 12 years old, 12, 13 years old when they made such samplers, but 10 years is really not unheard of. So it is quite likely that it is the AKGIT born in 1823, but we do not have any certainty, and there are no other bits that we can go by. What we do know is that she really stitched a fantastic sampler. I mean, I think you can agree with me when you see the sampler that it is really stunning. I fell in love with it the moment I saw it, and I think you will probably too. I'll give you a few of the technical details here so you know what to look out for. So the sampler itself is 409 crosses wide and 418 crosses high, and it has a total stitches of 76,807 crosses. That's quite a lot, of course, but it is a stunning sampler. And as a sort of a sizing sort of idea, so you know roughly how large the sampler would be if you were stitching it. 14 count Aida to 28 count linen, it would be about 20, sort of say 30 inches by 30 inches, or 75 by 75 centimeters on that material. On 20 count Aida or 40 count linen, it would be about 21 inches by 21 inches, or about 53 by 53 centimeters. And when you would work on much finer linen, such as 56 count linen, which is the original sampler was worked on roughly 50 count, you're looking about 14 7/8 inch by 14 5/8 inch, or 38 by 37 centimeters. Now, as I said, it is a big project, and I can totally see that someone working on this or really loving the sampler might be quite intimidated by it. As I said earlier, it is a beautiful meditative project. I started a couple of months ago with the sampler, and I am about 50% done with the sampler. I've just passed the 50% mark, which is quite exciting. But I can imagine that someone would say, like, well, that is simply too much for me. So I thought I am going to design some designs that are in the style of Vierlande Samplers, but are a little bit more manageable and are not like 75,000 crosses. So I decided to design 3 different size samplers. So the original one is the large, obviously. Then I thought I'll make a medium, a small, and a mini Vierlande style sampler. So first I'll tell you a little bit about the medium Vierlande style sampler. You can see this one in the image here. It's got 2 trees of life, it's got 3 large medallions, and then a series of smaller medallions sort of scattered around the whole thing, and it's got a alphabet in the traditional German style there. Now you can use these letters to stitch your own name. As you will notice, the J is missing, as stitches would not be using that letter. In Vierlande they did, however, stitch the X, Y, and Z. The letter U again is missing, as they would be using the V. This is something that's very traditional in a lot of samplers from all over the world. The pattern here is 141 crosses wide and 187 crosses in height, and has 12,183 crosses, so considerably less than the very large reproduction sampler. I forgot to mention that the reproduction sampler has a couple of very small areas of backstitch. There's hardly any, but there are just two diamond motifs that have a few backstitches in them. And one of the trees of life has a stitch off the grid. Basically, the tree is an even number wide, so the stem of the tree is too wide. But to make it pointy at the top, the stitcher decided to go off the grid and do 1 cross off the grid right in between the 2 crosses. So it is possible to stitch it on Aida, but just be aware that that one little cross, you can either compensate for it by making a little diagonal back stitch in between the 2 stitches, or you could opt to just go off the grid and really try and poke your needle in between the Aida fabric and not go through the holes for just that 1 cross. It's not the most fun thing, I know that, but it should not be impossible for you to do that. But yeah, that's the medium Vierlande, is fully like only crosses. So all of the designs that I made besides the reproduction have only full crosses and are pattern keeper compatible as well. The second design is the small Vierlande. As you can see in the image here, it's got 1 large tree of life right in the middle, surrounded by some half medallions and some mini medallions. The half medallions on traditional samplers are quite interesting, because you start wondering, did the girl stitch the full sampler by herself, or did her teacher maybe stitch half of the medallion where her exercise was to finish the other half of the sampler? Or perhaps the sampler was actually finished in an unfinished state where she would only work half of the medallion, because then she could just repeat the full medallion on the other side if she ever needed it. So it's a little bit unclear. For this one, I just purely used it because I wanted to try and squeeze as many nice ornaments into one space as possible with still making a nice pleasing image, but also having that sort of Vierlande feel to it still. This design is 101 crosses wide and 135 crosses in height and has 6,888 crosses in total, so it is again quite a bit smaller than the previous one. Finally, I have a mini Vierlande. Again, we have a tree of life at the center. This one is a little bit smaller and lots of sort of half like medallion forms and a few corner medallions as well. And there are, of course, some nice little reindeer. This one is considerably smaller. It's only 81 crosses wide and 99 crosses in height and has 3,636 crosses. So it's a fairly quick stitch, this one. This should not take too much of your time and should be really fun to do, I think, this one. That is the mini, the small and the medium size Vierlandes. Now I was going to leave it at that initially, but these patterns are so inspiring, and as I was finalizing all of the booklets, I came across a really lovely enamel box at an auction house, and it had a lovely text on it, and it said, "When this you see, remember me, though many miles we distant be." And I thought it was such a lovely sentiment of sort of friendship and giving something to a friend to remember you by. It's sort of the old forget-me-not type of saying, and I really liked it, and I thought I want to do something with this. So I designed this little sampler. I'm really quite pleased with it. It's got it's in like really lovely perfect symmetry, this design. It's got 2 trees of life, 2 little border motifs at the top. It's got a mini tree of life right at the top, several medallions. Yeah, I think it's a really nice design. I'm really happy with how it turned out. And I actually can't wait to start stitching this one as well. Right now I am doing proper monogamous stitching because I want to take the reproduction to stitch to the Jacobpalooza in Canada in October. I can't take the actual sampler with me because it's too valuable and it's too fragile to take all over the ocean with me, and I would just be really scared that something would happen to that one. But I thought, like, I can just take the replica that I'm making, and people can just look at that and they can feel it, and you know, I'm not precious about that. So that will be really nice to sort of travel with that one. But I'll need to crack on because time is flying, and I am only 50% done of this one. The When This You See, Remember Me sampler has a total of 8,330 crosses and measures 165 crosses in width and 139 crosses in height. Yeah, I am super excited about all of these projects, and I'm really looking forward to actually record a video and show you the progress that I'm making on my sampler. It's quite exciting actually, because as quite a special thing, I was looking at the samplers, and lots of these samplers have this beautiful black embroidery floss, and it's usually like a really beautiful rich brown color. Sometimes these samplers were so faded that they go to a golden ochre color, which is really nice. Sometimes they are nearly perfectly black, but a lot of the times they are more of a really dark rich brown color. So I went through my stash and I couldn't quite find anything that was matching this color, and DMC definitely didn't have anything that matched it perfectly. 310 is way too black, and then that dark chocolate that they have is again not perfect either. So I was sort of thinking like, I'll ask Caroline if she knows if Carrie from Roxy Floss Co has anything that sort of matches what I'm looking for. And Carrie was absolutely amazing. So she was thinking like, hey, indeed this is not there. And she started dyeing an amazing floss color, which is actually called Vierlande. So it's really cool. The samplers now have their own floss, Vierlande, and I think they're really, really good for any black sampler, really, if you want a little bit more of a warm tint to your stitching. I mean, Roxy Flossco has some really, really wonderful black colors. I think some of the Quakers will look absolutely stunning in the more cool blacks, the grey blacks that they do. But I really, really think that the Vierlandes will look stunning in the actual Vierlande floss that Roxy Flossco has released, and which are all available through Evertote in Canada. The patterns are all out now. You can buy them as PDFs from my own website. These are direct downloads like all of my other patterns, so you just go to www.modernfolkembroidery.com and you will find them in the various sections in my shop. All of the links for every pattern can be found in the description box in the video as well. However, if you want print patterns, I recommend going to evertote.ca in Canada, as Caroline is selling these, and she will be selling them for quite some time exclusively, so other shops won't be getting these designs yet. So it's only the paper copies through Evertote at the moment, and the PDF copies only through me. I'll leave it with that for today. I really hope you enjoyed this little video, although it's more of a podcast than a real video, I think, today. I do hope it's going to be a very, very busy couple of months, but I really do hope that I will have some time in a couple of weeks to sit down and do a proper video. And yes, it will be nice to sort of talk to a camera and have a little bit more of an idea of talking to you instead of just mumbling into a microphone. Take care of yourselves, look after one another, happy stitching, and thanks for watching and listening, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.